as we know, the Bitcoin law is set to go into effect very, very soon. And protesters have apparently taken to the streets. People who do not feel that they want Bitcoin to be legal tender. They're worried that perhaps their pensions will be paid in Bitcoin. Perhaps they don't understand the technology. So people have been taken to the streets. And then at the same time, you've got this $150 million Bitcoin trust that has been approved, and things are moving ahead on the Bitcoin ATM front, lots of infrastructure. So two very different stories being told in El Salvador at the moment. Ben, I'm going to throw this to you for your thoughts on what's going on there. Do you think that the people there I'm of two minds, because I love Bitcoin, right? And I want to see Bitcoin accepted. And I don't like the mandate, obviously, but these people don't seem to be protesting against a mandate. They seem to be protesting against Bitcoin. And that makes me sad, because it makes me feel like they don't quite understand what's going on with the US dollar in particular. So throwing this to you for all of your thoughts.
Sure. I mean, I think I think it can be called one and the same at this point, right? Like, there is a mandate. I know that the president has said, no, it's not actually a mandate. You don't actually have to accept this, but in law, that's what it says. And so to be protesting the mandate and Bitcoin are one in itself. And I think that's important here. I mean, this is sort of the logical conclusion of speed racing a bill through the legislature, through parliament, adopting a cryptocurrency, obviously the most prominent one, but as legal tender in a country where I think there's still a lot of educational work to be done, right? I was joking before the show. I was like, all right, tell this to my mom and my dad. If they had to accept Bitcoin, I can't even tell them about Pancake Swap doing something else for the most part in terms of my job. So it's hard to understand, right? And I think that this is kind of a logical conclusion when you don't do the educational work that's necessary, and particularly when it's being pushed through by the government in a lot of different ways. So I think you could see more of this. I think it's a really interesting contrast in terms of, sort of Maxi's crowing about this on Twitter and being really excited about it. And also shows that, we talk about Bitcoin as a transaction method and, a currency for people who are maybe outside of the banking system, banking the unbanked. People in El Salvador don't see it that way. And I think that's reasonable. I think it's okay to push back on this. And I think it shows that there's going to be more fights going forward as this process continues.
Will, do you think that these protesters were put up to it? Is this a genuine grassroots movement, or is there something nefarious going on here?
The Fiat Masons
by people who might not like
Bitcoin.
I just want to throw conspiracy theories out there. I want your take, Will.
It's conspiracy theory hour.
No, I just got to note, Ben's in the office today, and I love the background, looking great.
Yeah,
I can confirm that they have put Baby in the corner. I do not get the desk. I just got a corner of the studio.
Yikes!
Oh, that's not fair. Maybe by the end of the week.
Let's fix that.
We'll see if I
You
can.
have to prove yourself.
There's a few ways to look at this. I think the rational view is, yes, there's a problem with this legislation if you're forcing people to accept some sort of currency, and that currency is very new. It is very volatile. That's just an aspect of it. And people are worried. This is their life savings. They have a right to be upset and worried. I am wondering to what size and scale this has become an issue in El Salvador. It said hundreds of protesters have marched the streets. So obviously these people have a decent amount of conviction to go out there and be protesting against this bill. And it is not a great look for the Bitcoin ecosystem just to be dealing with legislation that forces it through like this. And that this is the consequence of that, where people are frustrated. They're not getting their answer or their questions answered. Some of the things they raised, though, I'm curious about. They said that they were worried about their pensions being paid in Bitcoin. I don't really know of how that was incorporated into this payments bill. Maybe someone on this panel can clear that up for me.
I mean, I just want to say to you, just briefly, there's also it's not, when people take to the streets, it's at risk to themselves, right? Even in the US, right? You come into contact with law enforcement, you come into contact with other people. I don't think it's fair to ask who's sponsoring these individuals or something like that. They're choosing and they're going out and they are protesting, and that comes at risk to themselves. And I just think that's important to note. And Will, maybe to your point, we could talk about the infrastructure bill that's currently being worked on in the US and ask if everybody understands every part of that. And I think that's a fair parallel in the sense that legislation is complicated and weird and hard and can easily be misconstrued in a number of ways. But Naomi, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I cut off Jen too, so I'll throw to you first, Jen.
Well, I think it's not hard to see how people may be misunderstanding the bill if that's the case. I mean, we saw the president launch a series of tweets that go against what's written in the bill, and the words in the bill still haven't changed. And if you look at minimum wage in El Salvador, it ranges from $243 to $365 a month, depending on the sector. So now you think about people who are making this amount of money, they're supporting their family, the education about the technology, about Bitcoin isn't there to support this law that seems to have been pushed through almost overnight. And so it's no surprise to see why people are concerned. I think when we hear about Bitcoin in the mainstream media, we hear about the extreme volatility, we hear about climate concerns, and we hear about regulatory concerns. So for people to be putting their earnings into Bitcoin, and I know that's not exactly what the bill is saying, but to be accepting Bitcoin as payment can be scary if you don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot to unpack here. I think that they probably don't understand the risks to the US dollar, which is why they kind of had this one-sided idea of Bitcoin is bad and US dollar has only upside. Perhaps if they understood all of the things that the central bank was doing at the moment to undermine the value of the US dollar, they might be more interested in parking some of their savings into something like Bitcoin. But yeah, I do think this whole thing was undermined, as we've already talked about, by the mandate, by the confusion as to what's actually law and what's actually just a tweet, by understanding what's actually a legal requirement. It's very confusing, and it could have been solved by, just uniting the crypto community around this and taking out that mandate.